I tell Catherine all the time, if I could only take her with me to do all of these introductions. I mean, she is just incredible, an incredible friend, I'm sure to all of you and to me, and somebody that I always rely on for sound advice, for prayer, for love and friendship. So I'm just really overwhelmed by the fact that I'm here and that I get my friend Catherine to introduce me, and in my own parish. So I feel very at home, and I can tell you that very different than many of the places I have to be. I told the fine police officers in the back they're not going to need to do anything today to stop people from throwing stuff at me for telling the truth. So I think you should just have a cup of coffee and relax. It's not always like that. We have very interesting things that we do around the county because, pursuing justice sometimes comes at a price. And it involves a lot of threats and a lot of people that don't want justice to thrive. And they want to exploit lies and half-truths in politics, but I still show up at all those places because somebody has to be there, right? Because there are people that depend on us for public safety. So I'm going to give you a huge overview of what's happening in public safety in our region. I'm very excited to kind of get you up to speed because you are a very powerful community. You are mothers, your neighbors, your business people, your teachers, and you are people of faith. And it's important that you're empowered with knowledge because knowledge is power, and to know what is really going on. So how do I get to give you this perspective? And to kind of, Catherine explained it, but just to kind of set for you where the DA's office is in relation to all of public safety. So the DA's office, which I have the privilege of leading and working alongside 1,000 amazing employees that are so dedicated, is the people's prosecutor, top prosecutor for San Diego County. So every time a crime is committed in any of our 18 cities, or unincorporated regions, that case is going to come to the district attorney's office, that criminal case. All felony crimes, everything from burglaries, robberies, all the way up to murder, are going to come to the district attorney's office from the 12 police agencies that we have in San Diego County and the multiple sheriff's jurisdictions. Also, all misdemeanor crime is going to come to the district attorney's office, except in the city of San Diego. So sometimes people wonder, what's the role of the city attorney's office? The city attorney is really the city's representative or lawyer, but they also do the misdemeanors in the city. So pretty much every kind of crime that happens, every kind of harm to anyone in our community is coming to the DA's office. And the DA, unfortunately there is no height requirement because I'm the top public safety official. I would have been in deep trouble if it required some sort of height. The DA is the top public safety official, so working closely and collaboratively with the 12 police chiefs and sheriff, we set public safety policy. But because it is the DA's office that is the one connector of all the different agencies, being the people's prosecutor, we're able to track trends and data about public safety in a way that is not done anywhere else because of that level of collaboration. So I'm able to see in real time what is happening, where are the gaps, where are the seams that are pulling that we need to come in and help reinforce to keep our community safe, to keep every neighborhood safe. So my main mission is to keep every neighborhood safe and to do it through upholding the rule of law. I know this is a new concept if you've been watching television and you see what's happening in LA and San Francisco. Apparently they're reading a different law book than I read, where you can't just go in and smash and grab and steal and pillage and beat elderly people on the street without accountability. That's not happening in San Diego. That will not happen on my watch. It's totally unacceptable. So we do it by applying the rule of law and delivering a fair and equal justice for all, where there is no favor, there's no prejudice against anyone or favor towards anyone. Everyone is treated fairly and equally under the law. That is what's required. Everyone is accountable in the same way. Being rich or poor doesn't make a difference as far as what level of justice you're supposed to receive. That is, I think, a tenet of our faith. We know that that's what we're supposed to do. So with that information, I want to kind of share with you where are the gaps that we're seeing. Okay? And the biggest gap began in March, actually, of 2020, but I didn't become fully aware of it till April of 2020. So what happened in March of 2020? The schools closed, right? So when the schools closed, I don't think many people realized that there's going to be another pandemic that we have to deal with. Because in April of 2020, I received the first report that I get monthly from the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. We have an excellent task force system where we invest together in one task force in different areas that are really complex and tough. So we bring kind of the whole region's resources to our issues. This is how we work well together, not in silos. I know this is a new concept in government, but this is how we do it in San Diego for law enforcement. And so what I saw in April, I had to take a double take. Because normally I get the reports and there's about 150 reports of internet crimes against children. We all know that that's one too many, right? But in April of 2020, just 1 month after the schools closed, that number was close to 600. And that stayed as a trend month after month. And it was truly terrifying. It was the stuff that kept me up at night. And then I called NCMEC, that's our partner, our national partner, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, to see if they are seeing similar trends as San Diego. And in fact, NCMEC experienced the same thing. Instead of 1 million reports that they get nationally, they were getting 4 million reports that were reported to me, to our conduit, and also to Forbes and every other national publication. Yet, didn't seem like anybody paid attention to it. It was quite devastating that predators were actually talking about that this is such an opportunity. Kids are now being actually encouraged to be distance learning on their computers, not in their churches, not in their sports, not in their schools, but rather being encouraged to be on their computers and tablets. And as boys began to enter the game rooms, and girls, so were predators. And they were doing their tricks and their deception and all of the things, because remember, the internet can hide a predator really well. And why can it do that? Because you can create any image you wish. You can look just like a 12-year-old that shares common interests with your child. You can look just like a 14-year-old that is a harmless young boy interested in a 13-year-old girl. You can make yourself look like anybody on the internet. So I wrote a 7-page letter to the governor, all of the schools, outlining this other pandemic that we're seeing, which is this explosion in internet crimes against children and in an explosion in our human trafficking task force, which we helped pioneer. We saw again that human trafficking against minors or kids was going up. So we also brought in the figures from Rady's Children's Hospital, where we have a team there's a team of doctors that does a suspicious abuse detection, where they're able to track something that looks suspicious. And they saw that those numbers also went up, which makes sense, because you now have already abusive, potentially parents who are there. Their domestic violence level is going up. They're trapped with their kids. There's no mandatory reporters to report to, and now the level of abuse in the home, in those families, is going up, with no one to really see it or protect our kids or women that are being abused. The first 7-page letter did not move the needle. So I'm a lawyer, so I wrote another 7-page letter a little bit later and had more data. And this time I also had the data, because I'm not a doctor, so I never write about, COVID and what people should do, but I'm a public safety expert. So that was my lens that was writing. But here was the journal from JAMA that said that there's actually a 37% lower transmission from schools that were open than the schools that were closed. And so I included that in my letter, and with that came some lawsuits where my letter got attached, and it helped move the needle and to allow our kids to come back to their safe havens, where there are the caring adults that can look at them, they can spend time in pro-social, positive activities. And that fight, though, is going to continue, because we know that there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to need the trusted adults, and we need our teachers and our communities to be able to react. And why is that? It's because we know that if you address adverse childhood experiences early, before they become really resistant trauma, you are able to recover and build resiliency and have kids be able to live healthy lives. So this is the time for our communities to step up, to provide opportunities for after-school programs, for faith programs, for positive activities, to lift up the kids who've been really wounded over the last couple of years. So that was a big area. The other area, and again, not surprising, is our drug problem became a crisis level drug problem. So fentanyl especially, opioids in general, and fentanyl, for some of you who don't know, fentanyl is an opioid. It's a synthetic opioid, so not the poppy flowers that extract the opioid. They're synthetically made in a lab, fentanyl, and unfortunately it is synthetically made in Mexico, and with San Diego being the largest entryway for fentanyl for the entire United States. Fentanyl, 2 salt grains can kill a human being. And what that means is that it's very easy to transport, because you can hide a much smaller amount that has the same impact in terms of selling it and adding it to a whole bunch of other stuff that's on the street. But fentanyl is a killer. There is no coming back from it. Unfortunately, just this week, I attended the funeral of a wonderful, wonderful mother and father who are friends, who lost their daughter. And those stories are happening everywhere. There is no bad family or good family. This is not that these are bad people. Addiction and kids experiment, we don't want them to. And we should send a clear message that experimenting can be a death sentence for them. That right now, one pill can kill. There is no room for experimenting because it is being added to things that kids have become conditioned to use without worry. So they don't write on the label, this is fentanyl. They make it in the lab in Mexico to look like an Oxycontin pill, an M30 Percocet pill. They make it look like Adderall that kids consume for ADHD. They make it look like Xanax, which a lot of adults and kids take for anxiety. And all of these things, though, if they're not coming from the pharmacy, if people are buying them on the street because they're overusing their prescription and it's running out, or the doctor is refusing to prescribe because they're seeing that there's a substance abuse issue, they're able to get it on the street. The problem is, even though it looks like something that came from the pharmacy, it is a killer. I'll give you one statistic that is terrifying. In 2019, we had 152 overdoses from fentanyl in San Diego. In 2020, that number went to 462. Can you imagine that? And in 2021, that number is over 840, and the coroner is still counting because they're 3 months behind usually on doing the medical examination and toxicology. So what does this number mean? And I want to put it in perspective for you, and why I believe that this is urgent for everyone in this room to discuss this with their families and with their neighbors, to discuss the fact that there is a fentanyl crisis and that the things that appear harmless, because kids are going to parties and they're putting a whole bunch of pills on the table that look like pharmaceuticals, and they're experimenting with them. That is happening, and these are not, it doesn't matter, I want to protect any kids, but these are not, I don't want them labeled, we don't want any of our kids doing this, but kids do stupid things, and we don't want to have a death sentence because of it. And so one of the things I want you to remember is a national study was put out that showed that fentanyl is the #1 killer for 18 to 45-year-olds in the United States. So that's higher than car accidents, deaths from COVID, cancer, diabetes, or any other cause, or gun violence. So that is, but when you turn on your TV, do you really hear about it? Do you really see the national ads like you would when you're dealing with a national crisis that's claiming people in the best of their life? These are going to be mothers, fathers, these are our next generation, these are our workforce, and they are dying, but our country is not treating it because they're almost afraid to talk about drugs as being a bad thing. It's almost like they don't want to talk about it, and I don't understand it because it is a crisis, and we have to bring it to our schools in terms of education. In December, we were able to convince the schools to transmit into each classroom a prevention program on fentanyl and opioids. And that should not be happening just one time. So teachers in every class, if they wanted to, were able to stop their education and let the information be transmitted that was validated by the County Office of Education. And our office planned this event around, I think it was December 9, and we were able to transmit into the classroom. But we know that you never retain something when you hear it just one time. It has to come at us in different forms. The one substance that has gone down that is negative for our community is nicotine. And how did that happen? That happened because the money from the nicotine companies was being used to do constant advertisements on television and on social media about the harms of nicotine. But now, the number of people dying are really from opioids and fentanyl. We need the same type of approach. Our office has invested, I can't tell you how many efforts and time into what's called the Homicide Team 10, which was covered in HBO as a best practice, where we deal with every overdose as if it is a murder, because it is a murder. They're being sold poison. And the cell phone evidence and everything is being used to track the dealers in order when before you have an overdose, the doctors come, they transport the body, and all of the evidence is lost. And now the homicide team, excuse me, comes in and they take over the investigation. And they take the cell phone evidence because the goal isn't just to get the dealer, but it's also to stop that bad batch from going to the next and the third person. We had a case like that where somebody died. The dealer knew that person died. The undercover agent called that dealer and tried to buy more drugs as an undercover operation. And that dealer was ready to sell him the same batch that he knew just killed someone. That case was charged as murder because we could show that they had the implicit, they knew they had a conscious disregard for life, which is required to charge murder. So what I'm telling you is that we do our part and we hold the dealers accountable, but at what cost after the death has already happened? So prevention is really key, and we can't do prevention alone. We need the community to talk about it and to act on it. Another area I want to discuss with you, thank you. I'll take a sip. Another area I want to discuss with you is you might have seen a report this morning about that crime rates have gone up in San Diego. And I want to put that crime rate in perspective for you. First of all, that's really terrible news. But second of all, you're not really hearing the real story, why this crime rates have gone up, right? So, one of the things that is important to put it in perspective is that San Diego's crime rates are still the lowest of any big urban county. We are still the safest urban county in America. That was just reported in a national article that compared crime data from San Diego to everywhere. And the reason is we didn't give up. We didn't say, and the police worked so hard despite everything they were under. Our team, the prosecutors, continued to show up and work every day. We didn't give up. We didn't give excuses that there's COVID, so we just throw up our hands and don't serve people, don't make people safe. Instead, we doubled down on our efforts to make sure that people are safe, and I'll give you some examples of that. But while our data went up somewhere between 2% and 13%, depending what kind of crime you're talking about, this was not the same as most big regions. As an example, Philadelphia, the same size city as San Diego, had 550 murders. We had 55. So 55 again is one too many, but it is nothing. We are nowhere near what is happening in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in Philadelphia, anywhere else. But even that small rise is very upsetting to me, because that's people being hurt, and I don't like it one bit. But the reasons were foisted upon us. One of the things that happened is they used COVID as an excuse to release criminals from prison without any parole plan. And the last phase that they were going to release were the higher level violent criminals. And even though we are prosecutors, we don't do civil lawsuits, we had to file a civil lawsuit to stop the California Department of Corrections from releasing this higher level criminal. And the court sided with us. They gave us a restraining order because what we argued made a lot of sense. And that's that victims also have rights. They have rights in the Constitution under Marcy's law. And so when a domestic violence victim or a human trafficking victim has a date of when their offender is going to be released, they are looking at that date and they're breathing some peace, knowing that the offender is far away from them. But now they're just hearing that, oh, I'm sorry, they're going to be released a year or two early without any preparation. And that's why our lawsuit worked for now. We're going to keep fighting. It's going to be an uphill battle. But that happened. The other thing that happened is that there was zero bail that came down, again, as a mitigation for COVID. And don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone to be, I want health protocols, I want people to be safe, I want all of that, but I also don't want harm to my community. I want that balance. And what happened is we had to reduce the jail population from 5,400, which was already low for the size of 3.3 million people, down to 4,000. And with that, and with cases getting backlogged, like we have 100 murder cases pending right now, and another 140 sexual assault cases pending, we have to leave room in the prison with that limited number for the higher level offenders, which means that the zero bail granted for not really low level, but mid to low level was causing crime to go up, but very differently again than other regions because we were watchful. But now we're having daily meetings to go back to the way we used to do business, which is to make sure that the community is safe. So again, this is a struggle, but I'm giving you the backstory that people aren't talking about, all of the releases, everything that happened. This issue also impacted our homeless population. As you know, as Catholics, we obviously have compassion for people experiencing homelessness. And we know that charity and compassion is really important. But what Father Joe's villages are experiencing is very different these days. There are not one big category of homeless people. There are people that should not be on the street. There are people escaping violence. They are mothers, they are children. I've visited them in the shelters. One mother broke my heart, told me as soon as her daughter became almost a teenager, she had to run because she could see that the trafficker, who happened to be her father, was already eyeing her for human trafficking because she was coming of age. So she'd rather be homeless than stay in that situation. Those things they have to be solved. We cannot sit back and let homeless people become homeless because of abuse, because they're runaway, because they're throwaway kids, because they're foster kids that are moving from home to home. But there is another population. There is a population that wants to live outside the rules of society. They are committing crimes. They are terrifying staff at Father Joe's and other places. They are on methamphetamine, which is a drug that really makes you violent. And they're attacking people as they walk. You've seen the stories and the images, not to the same extent as we're seeing in New York, where you have people being pushed into the subway and killed. But this is not appropriate. This is not a solution to just say, well, they get to choose to be on the street and live outside the rules of the law. This is not the right way to go. There has to be accountability. And when they're suffering from mental health issues and substance abuse, we need to help them and encourage them to seek that treatment. But the solution that our state has now is that they have to choose that treatment for themselves. The reality is that when people are in the throes of addiction and severe mental illness, they need guidance, they need help. And I experienced this firsthand when I pioneered the first pilot for the Veterans Treatment Court that Catherine talked about. Some of our veterans were returning with PTSD and with addictions, and they were committing crimes. And I thought, well, you can just voluntarily offer them treatment, and of course they'll say yes. Absolutely not. That was not the answer. We offered them treatment, they said no. So then I offered them to go to jail or have treatment. And then they said yes to treatment. And once they started getting treatment, they wanted to stay in treatment. And they were able to begin to see the light. This is the same solution we need for some of our homeless population. We need to give them a clear alternative. And the alternative can't be you get to stay on the street, camp out on the sidewalk in front of businesses, hit people in the back when they're walking, commit robberies at 150 times the rate of the regular population, commit murders at 65 the rate of the regular non-homeless population. That is not an acceptable solution. So on March 21st, I'll be hosting a symposium where I've invited all the mayors, police chiefs, and all of the homeless advocates in order to give them the data that I've been gathering about the relationship and intersection between homelessness and crime. And the intersection is very large, and we should not be talking about folks who are suffering from homelessness under one umbrella. They are different categories and they need different solutions. And so with that data, I'm also offering a solution to it. One is to have this system like our Veterans Treatment Court for folks who are homeless, where they don't really have the option to accept treatment. It has to happen. And then second, I'm offering a solution that we used during COVID that was an accidental. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And so in this situation, I got a little bit lucky. But once we got lucky, we took full advantage and we moved forward with this solution. And here's what it is. During our COVID situation, we have 400 shelter beds for victims of crime. So only 400 for human trafficking, children of the Immaculate Heart, all of the different places that you all support, but only 400 for domestic violence, human trafficking, child abuse, elder abuse, all of them, 400 shelter beds. So during the COVID situation, the shelter bedroom became very, very tight because they didn't want to pack it in. So we couldn't afford to not know if there was a shelter bed available. So before this time where we created this new solution, a victim would have to call multiple times, call this shelter, Rachel's house, call Center for Community Solutions, call the 211 number to try to find shelter. Well, we knew that that was no longer an option because lots of times our victims are with their abuser. So they can't get away to make these calls. They may be able to do it one time. We needed that one time to count. We felt a race against time. And you know, sometimes necessity is the mother of invention. And so with that race, we've discovered that there is a large, very old technology company that is a nonprofit. Their whole goal in life is to support nonprofits to become more efficient and better. We called them to San Diego and we said, we are a very mission-driven community. We want to get this done. Can you help us? They created a web-based solution. All 400 beds put on one application with an assessment. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it a child? Is it a family with pets? Is it a mother with children? Are there severe mental illness issues? Are there gang threats, or it has to be more secure? On an assessment that we built together as a community. And we began to be able to shelter people that call one time in 20 minutes. Unbelievable. So you are the first to hear that this is one of the solutions that I'm offering to our county. Because when you or I call to get a hotel, right? You know in real time whether there's a hotel room available, whether it's smoking, non-smoking, does it allow pets? But in San Diego County, we have no idea whether shelter beds are available. Everybody tells you there isn't enough, and there may not be enough. But we don't know that for a fact because we do not have a consolidated technology that puts every available resource and what it can offer on one application so that we can humanely and compassionately and efficiently give people shelter and housing, which also solves another problem because there's a case called Boise versus Idaho that does not allow you to remove an encampment if you do not have shelter. But we don't know if we have shelter. So we can never meet the case law that makes sense. Like, how can you kick somebody out of the only shelter they have if you don't have shelter for them? So I am very, very excited about being able to learn from my lane, which is I spend my days protecting victims of crime. And so we learned from that we were able to do it. Yes, on a smaller scale, but it's possible that we can bring a bigger scale solution to this problem. Because people on the street also statistically are a higher rate of being victims of crime. And that is also a heartbreak. And they're always trying to find shelter and safety because they're also targets of crime, in addition to some of them being perpetrators of major crime and recidivist crime. So I'm gonna end with three exciting things, because I gave you a lot of kind of bad news, right? So I have to balance it with some really good news. So one of the biggest pieces of great news is a dream of mine for the last 15 years was to open a family justice center in the North region, in the North County. And when I became the DA in 2018, that was the first thing I put on my priority list. And why is that? It's because victims of crime, the trauma that they suffer from sexual assault, human trafficking, child abuse, elder abuse, is so tremendous that we owe them the compassion and the hope of providing all of the services in one place, rather than giving them a note, which is what my victim services has to do now. With 10 different locations they have to go to get shelter, to get their mental health trauma care, to get their food, to be able to go and get a new job because they've been sold like a piece of pizza as prostitutes since the age of 12. And now we need them to relearn, to get a job that honors them, that gives them dignity. All of those lists would go away, and you'd have one place, a one-stop hub, where you get your examination for domestic violence, sexual assault, you get your mental health care, you get your retraining for a job, working with all the businesses that are going to volunteer, you get your food, and you never walk out without shelter over your head. We're going to bring that application because we know that homelessness for victims of crime, the biggest driver is violence, and we cannot have that happen to them. So that is going to open in May of this year. This dream is becoming a reality. If I tell you it's a showstopper, you will not believe me unless you went there. This place was going to be, for me, when you walk in, you know you're not getting leftovers as a victim. You are getting a 5-course meal. And the place has more recycled wood and timber than any place I've ever seen. It is absolutely stunning, state of the art. It is a place of true hope, healing, and justice. And we hope all of you will come visit it, and that you'll want to volunteer, you'll want to give your time, and you'll want to be a part of it. So it's truly very, very exciting. The other, and I didn't let COVID delay my plans. The workers called me, I don't care, we're going to build it. And every few weeks we go and we visit, we make sure it's on track. It's like, it's going to happen because, crime doesn't wait and our victims can't wait. So it's super exciting. The other really piece of good news is I sent my team out to look for a solution, because one of the things that families talk to me about all the time is mental health, and family members being in crisis with mental health, and that there is nowhere in San Diego that where you can walk in 24/7 with a loved one in crisis who is out of medication or is spiraling, and get them the help they need. So the only solution they have is to call 911. And then the 911 response is police officers who now are also in harm's way themselves, because they're dealing with somebody who is floridly psychotic, who might have a knife, who's attacking them. So before we get to that point, what can families have as access? Because to me, that's crime prevention. If you can stop it before it turns into a public safety crisis, you're able to help that family and that individual. I also wanted that solution to have a door for police, to be able to drop off someone in crisis. Because again, jail is not going to be the right place for people who aren't violent, who are just need help. But they're, we see them. It's very sad walking across the street. They're not able to care for themselves. So we opened the first one. Again, no excuses that we've got stuff going. We needed this, so we opened it in Vista. It's a crisis stabilization center, and it opened in October. And let me tell you, it's been used 850 times already. 470 families walked in and got care for their loved ones. And the other numbers are by police, by deputy sheriff drop-offs. And I've now pushed the county to open these everywhere, because it is a humane solution that keeps the community safe, but also provides help for families that are crying for help with mental health and substance abuse. That's the second piece of good news. And I had a third piece of good news. What is it? Oh yeah. The third piece of good news is for any CSI lovers in here, or forensic CSI, I don't know. Oh, good, good. I'm obsessed with it. So when I opened our Sex Crimes and Human Trafficking Division, I really wanted to name it Law and Order Special Victims Unit, but there's a copyright. But the good news is the New York Times has said that our unit, humbly, is the real life version of Law and Order Special Victims Unit, which is even better than the name. So one of the things I really wanted is to enhance our ability to use the latest CSI advances to solve crime, to solve homicides, to solve rapes. So we got a $500,000 grant, very elite grant, only a few offices got it, to advance our genealogy work. Anybody watch the Golden State Killer? That's the huge, it was solved by genealogy. The first case, my friend Anne-Marie Schubert, the DA in Sacramento, was instrumental in that. And with this grant, we expanded, and in a short period of time, with our team of amazing investigators and prosecutors, and using genealogy, 7 cold case homicides have been solved. One of them is 45 years old. And when you call that family and you tell them that you did not forget about the justice they so deserve, and that you were able to solve that case, those are some of the best calls I make. I cannot tell you how proud I am to make those calls. But we also used our advances to test every rape kit in San Diego County. So we have 0 backlog. And we've already charged 3 cases from the results of those rape kits. 3 cases, including one that haunts me, a 13-year-old that was sexually assaulted with no solution until we entered that rape kit and we were able to bring the perpetrator to justice. So that's 3 great news. So even though this job is, it's 100-hour weeks, it's unbelievable. As a Catholic woman, I just think I can't believe that, God is using me as an instrument in this way. It is so humbling to bring safety and a sense of justice and peace to people in their worst of times, and to bring a feeling of compassion, accountability, and just a feeling of justice to our community. So thank you for having me here today, and if you have any questions.
Good morning. So, in behalf of our parish, I'd like to thank our guests. Thank you for coming. And I'll be very happy to see you in church. I don't see you, so I don't know. But at least now I know that you are here. And we actually have the same feelings of concern for our people. So I was listening to you, and it pays to have a Catholic lawyer in the midst. So thank you so much. I listened to you once during our conference with all the priests, and I was deeply impressed. Thank you so much, and welcome back.
Father Goss is talking about when Bishop McElroy invited me to teach all of the priests about how to prevent child abuse, how to detect child sexual abuse ahead of time. What he didn't tell me is that it was going to be in a gymnasium at USD, a basketball gymnasium with 2,000 people. At the time, Father Duncanson was our priest, and I look over and I see Father Duncanson there. I'm like, okay, I'll be okay. All right, 2,000 people, we can do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Regarding the fentanyl, do you feel you're getting the support that you need from the other side of the border, from Mexico?
Absolutely not. It's all talk, There, no. I mean, there is no enforcement on that side. You know, the president there, again, I don't do politics, I only do rule of law, but unfortunately, he basically said, you know, he's gonna give love, which I believe in love too. It's just that if you're a cartel, you don't really understand that language. You have to stop the supply.
So I have three questions.
Really?
Yeah. Is there any sort of movement to change the 5150 laws, 72-hour holds, so people aren't being just dumped out in the community? Is there a movement that way? And then, is there a breakdown of the homelessness? How many people are mentally ill, abused, as you stated, and illegal? That we're bringing people in and just dumping them on the streets. And then my last question has to do with the Chilean gangs. We attended a meeting and we were told by the sheriff's department that it's basically, they catch them, it's a revolving door, they're put in jail, maybe, and then they're let back out on the street. So, and he said that they've been working with the FBI, because I know this is a problem across the United States, so I was wondering if you could address that. Thank you.
Yes, so on the 5150, yes. So California got a D grade compared to all the other states in our laws addressing people with mental illness. So I have a bill pending right now that changes the standard to the same standard that other states have, defining gravely ill as unable to care for self or others, not just threat to self or others. Because if you let people get to the point where they're a threat, it's too late. They've either done harm or their situation is so, it's like telling somebody who has cancer, wait till you're stage 5 or, you know, before we deal with you. We should deal with things earlier. I can tell you no legislator has agreed to take up my bill, and that's one of the reasons I've done this big press event, invited all the media on March 21st, because they're going to have to look at me when I explain it and decide that they're not going to take it forward as a law. It needs to go forward. So we're working on that. The other question about categorization, no, there isn't any data. We only know from the point and count that about 40% self-report that they have mental illness and those kinds of issues. But there is no good data that's being taken. So my data is the first data that's going to be revealed, because for the last 2 years I have tracked criminal cases that we charge by whether the person was a victim, was homeless, or the person who's the offender was homeless. So that is the first kind of big slice of data that we're going to reveal. And I think your third question about the Chilean, I can't talk too much about the case because it is being investigated by the FBI, but I have a major violator, tough prosecutor assigned to the case. And all I can say is I think there's a glimmer of hope. That's all I can say right now. Yes.
So I really appreciate what you said about the umbrella, you know, that everything is different instead of, you know, one size fits all. So I know we all run into the homeless thing. So I look at Carlsbad and I come across a lot of young people that I think fit into that description of they were escaping something. And, you know, I try to do what I can, help them. Would we be able to have access to these 3 different facilities? Where we could perhaps give them a card, information, maybe drive them, you know, depending on the situation, drive them to the facility. Do you have that available for us?
I will have that available to you. The crisis stabilization, I'll make sure Catherine has the address and information. So we will do that so that she can provide it. The Family Justice Center, you know, hasn't opened yet, but when it opens, we will have that information for you.
Wonderful. And do you have a website?
She does.
Well, you can go to sandiegod.com because we will post all of those resources on there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes?
Hi, Susan. Thank you. You shed some light on questions of mine for years. I talked to Father Joe, may he rest in peace, and I couldn't understand why you couldn't feed homeless on the street because growing up Italian, I want to feed everyone. I thought they had really stringent entrance rules that they couldn't be on drugs if they house them there, but they can be fed there without being tested or without going through processes. What do you think that's something we can do better in San Diego to separate them because we house a lot of homeless, but is that maybe a big glitch in the system?
You know, I mean, I think I haven't seen many really rules about feeding. I do see people feeding. It's just that Father Joe's has to follow a certain strict, kind of criteria because they get federal and state funding. So I don't think that prevents like the church or anybody from feeding, but I think through Father Joe's, they have to follow a certain process and they have to do it a certain way. Food is really important. The issue is that there is not a carrot to it, meaning you give the food. In San Francisco, for example, they thought if they had a center where they provide syringes and a place where people can come in, and that turned into a den for drug dealers and everybody else. So there has to be a way to encourage people to go into treatment. And that's kind of my point is I don't think it's humane to do what we're doing because we're feeding the habit as opposed to feeding the person's soul and their body.
Very good points. I'd love to introduce you to Cece Moore if you haven't met her, the genetic detective. She would love to know what you're doing in San Diego.
Yeah, I think we did. I think she did give a talk to our team. She's amazing. Yeah.
I love what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Craig.
Yeah, I have a question from two angles. One is if the jail population went down from 5,400 to 4,000, I'm on the board of the Restorative Justice Mediation Program, which
Yes.
you have supported many times, so thank you. But how do those 1,400 people get on some kind of a more proactive reentry path? I mean, we're pivoting more toward that. And the other question is for the 4,000 that are still in jail, the prison ministry here at Nativity has been very, very active, and we were shut out of the jails for a long time, and the attendance now that we're back in has dropped dramatically. We used to have 30 kids in each service. Now there's maybe one or two. And so both populations, the people that are getting out and the people that are staying in, don't seem to have, the help that they need.
Right. So starting with your last question, I don't know for sure, but I would suspect that the reason the attendance dropped is because we have a much higher level criminal in the jail right now. It isn't, so it is a very, very serious population right now because all of the kind of mid-level, we really never had very low-level offenders, but mid-level. The re-entry that you're talking about, this is something we are earnestly discussing, is if the jail numbers are going to remain low, doing it this way is irresponsible. Just releasing people without services, right? A re-entry way to go into restorative treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy, job connections, drug treatment connections, a way where their release is dependent on participation that will make them healthy and will bring them into the fold. So I'm with you in that I'm okay with some people staying out, but I'm not okay in the way it's done right now, where there is no connection to staying out of the criminal behavior through restorative justice. Yes. Is there anybody else? Then I'll go back to you. No, go ahead.
So I know you're up for re-election. Yes, let's
Well, I don't know if Soros ever came up on a Catholic woman because we remain the only region in the United States where Soros spent $2.2 million to bury me and it didn't work out. I want that. So if they come again, we will fight.
Can I just make?
Yeah.
How can we support, there's so much negative media against the police officers. One thing the deputies told us, that they said in the years past, there were many people that came into law enforcement. This year, maybe 5 candidates. So what can we do, or what meetings can we attend to support them and turn this negative concept towards police officers around?
No, it is a great question because they have such a hard job and there's constantly, they may not be right now talking about defunding because that's become like a little, like they can see when they've seen the cities burn, the defunding isn't like when they decided to, in Portland, to have the police department move out so that they can have a free zone for protests. That was an interesting concept. Didn't work out, turned it into a murder zone, everything else. So now they don't talk about defunding in the same way, but they're still finding ways, like cutting overtime, having less and less kind of incentives for people to join police. Your voice is very important. I tell you, every Board of Supervisors meeting, I hear hundreds on the line that talk about their point of view, which is like one experience they've had with a police officer that they didn't like that now pains the whole police department. Your voice is important, so kind of looking at those agendas, pulling them, whether it's the city or the county, and if there's something about police getting funding, getting support, just a few callers make a big difference. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you for being here, Stephan. And I'm concerned about mental health.
Yes.
And I noticed that you mentioned that there's going to be the Vista Crisis Stabilization Center. Are there committees in the county, whether it's in the DA's office or through HHSA or some other group, where people who have some life experience with mental health issues can be part of a committee to help to give input?
There are those committees, and whenever we come up with solutions, we always have like community members that have experience, lived experience, or otherwise. We always involve NAMI, that's a big organization that we work with. But I mean, I'll connect you with my person that does all of the mental health initiatives.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so just give me your name and number. We'd love your input.
This isn't a bribe, it's from all of your friends here at the table. Thank you so much and have a happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you for coming.